Welcome back to New Day. A Seattle native is sharing his story of coming up from the streets all the way to working in Microsoft Suites in a new book. Get Back Up chronicles the unusual rags to riches story over a lifetime of adventures, struggles, and triumphs. Please welcome the book's author, George Santino. It's so good to have you here. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit about how you grew up.
Well, I grew up in the projects of South Philadelphia on welfare, surplus food. They didn't have food stamps yet back then. You'd actually go to a surplus food warehouse and get your powdered milk and your powdered eggs, and that's what you ate. In fact, I remember the first time I ever went into a grocery store and saw liquid milk. I thought that was for people too lazy to mix their own milk. I thought it was supposed to be powdered. I thought that's the way milk came. But we were extremely poor, but we didn't really know it. That's just the way our life was.
Right.
Until, you know, we lived in a 3-bedroom, 1-bath project, housing projects with 7 kids and my parents all sharing the 1 bathroom. And as I grew up and started to go to school and see that there was something else, that there were kids that had bikes and went to the movies and had candy to eat, I said, I think there's more out there than I knew.
And so what goes through your mind when you're not surrounded by this? You know it exists, and you probably don't have the first clue yet how to get from where you are to where you want to go.
Well, I think I figured out fairly quickly that it was going to take money.
Yeah.
The bikes weren't free,
helps.
and the penny candies, though they were only pennies back then, still you had to have pennies.
Right.
And I knew that soda bottles could be returned to a store for 2 cents. And so I started digging through trash and looking for soda bottles that people threw away and took them back to the store and got the 2 cents. And with that, you could buy penny candies and a lot of candies for back then in the 60s. And that wasn't enough. I wanted more money than that. I wanted to go to movies, and the movies were very expensive. That was $0.25 to go to the movies.
Outrageous.
So, right. Yeah. So, and a guy used to come into the neighborhood with a truck selling tomatoes off the back of the truck. And so I went up to him, 7 years old, and said, why don't you go door to door? And he said, well, nobody will watch the truck. And I said, I'll watch the truck for $0.25. And he said, no, I don't want you watching the truck. You might steal my tomatoes. And I go, so how about if I go door to door then? I still might steal them, but at least I could try to sell them. And so he hired me to go door to door selling tomatoes, and he paid me $0.05 per bag. And at the end of the day, I had 50 cents. Wow. 50 cents.
That must have seemed like the mother
I went to the movies. I saw The Creature from the Black Lagoon at the movies. I bought penny candies. I was so sick at the end of the day from eating candy that it was like I was rich. And once I got that taste, not just of the penny candies, but of having some money, that was it. I knew that my life had to be way different than what it was.
And you linked that, what I love, that creativity, that entrepreneurial spirit at 7, and figured out, yeah, the work is what's going to lead me down the road. Where was the turning point in your life?
Well, I think that when my father was disabled, he applied for a Social Security disability and he didn't get it. He had to keep applying and applying, and finally, it took 8 years, he finally got it. And they gave him a lump sum all at once. I don't know how much money it was. I'm sure to him it was a fortune, but that got us out of the projects and down into Tampa, Florida, which just in the nick of time. I mean, it started to get very violent. Gangs were starting to form. A couple of my friends got killed. It was getting out of there was a great thing. Well, once we got to Tampa and we lived in a house in the suburbs in the neighborhood, that's when my eyes really opened up and said, there's a much different world out here. And that's, people had jobs, people had cars, people had bikes, and that's where I said, this is where I have to really work hard to try to get what these people around us have.
How did you end up at Microsoft?
Well, that's a long story.
That's
it took 344 pages to tell that story.
The cool thing about it is that read the book and find out a little bit more about the journey, but it wasn't once or twice or 3 times. It was 4 times, right, that you tried to get a job there?
They didn't want to hire me. I didn't have a college degree. I had a high school diploma. I had no formal training or experience in computers. I was all self-taught. When computers first started coming out, I had a friend of mine, Johnson, and I used to buy kits and build them, and we learned about computers and software. And so when one of my last businesses failed in Florida, we packed up a U-Haul truck with what was left of our possessions that hadn't been repossessed and moved to California.
I'm not laughing at you. I just admire your spirit.
There are lots of setbacks along the way. It was definitely a never give up kind of story. And I said, I know software. I know computers. Microsoft needs people who know softwares and computers. So I'll apply there. And so I sent my resume in that said I managed a Wendy's and an Arby's and a Burger Chef. And I figured they'd need somebody who did those things.
Why not?
There's food there. They have cafeterias. And so I applied. And 2 days later, I got a rejection letter saying, thank you, but no thanks. So I called him on the phone. And I said, hey, George Santino, I got your rejection letter. Just want to know why. You know, I was a life insurance salesman for a while, and being a life insurance salesman will teach you that a no isn't a no. A no is just a request for more information.
Yes, exactly.
You want to sell the product, you got to get through those objections. So I treated it the same way. I called them and said, why'd you send me the rejection letter? Much to my surprise, they turned me down because I didn't have a college degree. And I said, college degree? Do you know Bill Gates? And they said, well, of course, he founded the company. I said, you do know he doesn't have a college degree, right? And they said, you're not comparing yourself to Bill Gates, are you? I said, only in as much as he doesn't have a college degree, just like me. Right? And so they said, well, you're right. So would you come in the next day for an interview? So I said, sure. So I got past that objection, went in the next day for an interview, talked to 6 different people, got all their strange puzzle questions and logic questions that they love to ask at Microsoft, and thought, hey, did great. Except 2 days later, I got the same letter.
Same thing.
And so I called them back again. And this time they said, well, you don't have 5 years Windows testing experience. I said, this is PowerPoint, right? And they said, yes. Isn't that a Mac shop that just got bought by Microsoft 2 years ago? And they said, well, yes. I said, you don't have 5 years Windows testing experience either. Nobody there has 5 years Windows testing experience. And they said, well, good point. Could you come back again? Well, that went on and on and on, and I think they were trying to wear me down. You know,
little did they know.
And so, you know, the chapter of the book is called Microsoft's Arrogance versus Mine. Right? I wasn't giving up. I kept calling back. And finally, the lady I was talking to said, you certainly are tenacious. And I said, yes, that's one thing I am is tenacious. And she said, well, we have a job working in our test lab. And I said, to tell you the truth, I will take a job sweeping the floors if that's what it takes to get in there and show you people I know what I'm doing. Right. And she said, funny you should say that because keeping the lab clean would be a part of your responsibility.
Oh my gosh. And on that note, let me thoroughly recommend this job because it is a lesson for all of us in how to get through, how to overcome, and make a success when nobody would expect, right? Thank you so much for being here. I'm so glad you made it. I should have listened to you much earlier in my life. I think George is doing a book signing and a Q&A tomorrow, June 17th June 17th, that's right, at Third Place Books. Is that when you're doing it?
Yes, tomorrow night.
Okay, got it. And Lake Forest Park at 6:30 p.m. And as a bonus, everybody in today's studio audience is going home with their own copy of Get Back Up. You're going to enjoy that. All right. Thank you so much for the light.